Tonight, Israel confirms it has killed the head of Hamas.
The mastermind of this day of sheer evil is no more.
Yahya Sinwar, an architect of the October 7th attacks and one of Israel's top targets. Could his death change the trajectory of the war?
We're determined to try and seize that opportunity.
A former Canadian Olympian now wanted for murder.
He chose to become a major drug trafficker, and he chose to become a killer.
The criminal enterprise he's accused of running. And more pressure on Justin Trudeau.
The Prime Minister should tell us who they are.
Along with more pushback. The growing fight over foreign interference and the politics at play with Rosie and Adish.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Israeli officials have confirmed the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, is dead. The man who helped spark a war now into its second year and still burning through the Middle East. Sinwar was the accused architect of the October 7th massacre, killing nearly 1,200 in Israel and kidnapping about 250 hostages. Since then, Gaza health officials say Israel has killed more than 42,000 people in the Strip, most reportedly women, children, and the elderly. Israel has always said the target is Hamas. Sinwar himself among the most important of all. Briar Stewart now with the celebrations in Israel, the response in Gaza, and what could potentially come next.
Across Israel, celebrations after the news that Yahya Sinwar had been killed.
My wife told me that Sinwar was killed, and the first time I said, bring the whiskey, we'll drink l'chaim for it.
The Israeli military says this video from a drone flying in southern Gaza shows Sinwar just before his death. He appears immobile, but at one point throws something to try and knock down the drone. Israel says he was later killed, his body transferred to Tel Aviv and identified in part by old dental records.
Today, the mastermind of this day of sheer evil is no more.
Sinwar was the architect of the October 7th massacre, part of it captured by militants in this video as they murdered around 1,200 people and took about 250 hostage. And now their families fear what could come next.
This is a critical, time-sensitive development as it relates to the hostages. Their lives are in great danger now, more than ever.
Israeli officials say Sinwar wasn't found near any hostages. He spent most of the last year hidden in Gaza's vast network of tunnels. Even as the death toll in Gaza mounted, he was unwilling to stop Hamas's fight against Israel. In Gaza, there appeared to be little shock over his death. Big and small leaders were killed in Palestine's journey for revolution, said this man to a videographer working for CBC News. In Ramallah, in the occupied West Bank, some people told us that they were too afraid to give their opinion. Others said Sinwar was a strong leader. It's a great loss for the Palestinian people. An assassination, says this man.
I saw my friend's mom. She was crying because what happened. So it's really a bad thing and everyone will get emotional first.
Just what happens next is far from clear.
This war can end tomorrow. It can end if Hamas lays down its arms and returns our hostages.
If not, Israel's prime minister says it will continue full force. But Washington sees Sinwar's death as an opening.
We believe it is an opportunity to try and bring an end to this war, and we're determined to try and seize that opportunity.
But there has been optimism before about deals that never came together, and an end to the war that has killed tens of thousands. As for any potential ceasefire deal, Qatar, which has been moderating the talks, says that there hasn't been any negotiations in about 3 to 4 weeks.
So, Briar, in a way, does this change anything?
Well, I think there is a lot of uncertainty. I mean, Sinwar was an obstacle. He was against the ceasefire deal, but he was a known quantity. He was in charge, and it was his decision to make. Now with him gone, it's not really clear who mediators would be negotiating with and whether that person would have full control over the militants that are still left on the ground.
All right, Briar Stewart in Jerusalem tonight. Thanks, Briar. All right, let's go to senior international correspondent Margaret Evans, who's in London now. So, Margaret, there is talk, at least from Washington, about this maybe being an off-ramp to peace.
Yeah, we're not hearing that from Benjamin Netanyahu. He said it, we will not stop the war. So he's already at odds with the White House, with the Biden-Harris administration, who are saying they see this as an opportunity to reopen negotiations that would see the hostages come home and an end to the suffering that we're witnessing amongst Palestinians in Gaza. Netanyahu has also been clear all along, saying that he doesn't believe negotiations are the way to get the hostages home. That, he says, will come through military might. He's also said he won't stop the war until Hamas is destroyed. And we don't really know what his metric is for measuring that. The other unknown, of course, is what is Israel's plan for the day after for Gaza? Is it going to be a military occupation? And, you know, within Netanyahu's own cabinet, there's pressure from hard-line nationalists who would like to see Gaza resettled by Israel.
And Margaret, tonight, obviously, there's also a lot of anxiety about the fate of those remaining hostages in Gaza.
Yeah, they're really in potentially a very perilous situation. The Hamas command and communications are going to have been disrupted by this. There are different groups likely holding them. There is a potential for panic, and we're seeing Israeli politicians calling for the government to make it clear that there is safe passage, potentially reward money for anyone delivering hostages to safety. If there is a chance for a negotiation with a good outcome potentially, it's going to rely on Sinwar's replacement being much more willing to compromise than he apparently was.
All right, Margaret Evans in London. Thanks, Margaret. For more on Yahya Sinwar, you can go to cbc.ca/The National. There you can see Terence McKenna's profile of the Hamas leader, including interviews with those who knew him and a deep dive into his rise in Hamas and his role in October 7th. A former Canadian Olympian is on the run tonight. Once an elite snowboarder, Ryan Wedding is now the target of a massive manhunt, wanted for a string of serious crimes from drug trafficking to murder. Thomas Dagna with the extensive operation to apprehend him.
When the FBI swooped in on a South Florida mansion, it was the first sign of a police offensive from Colombia to Canada. At the center of it all, this former Olympic snowboarder turned fugitive, now facing murder charges.
He chose to become a major drug trafficker, and he chose to become a killer.
Un autre Canadien maintenant, Ryan Wedding.
Ryan Wedding's life took a turn sometime after he competed for Canada at the 2002 Olympics in Salt Lake City. U.S. authorities laying out drugs and guns seized from a billion-dollar criminal enterprise they say was headed by Wedding.
This group was ruthless and violent. They would use contract killers to assassinate anyone who they saw as an obstacle to their operation.
Among their victims, the parents of Jaspreet Kaur Sidhu in Caledon, Ontario, visiting from India last year and killed, police say, in a case of mistaken identity. Their daughter was shot 13 times herself and spoke to CBC News when she was still in hospital.
I still have to learn sitting, standing, walking. It's been very hard.
In all, 16 men are facing charges connected to the transnational drug smuggling ring, accused of moving a staggering 60 tons of cocaine a year.
While key members of Ryan Wedding's violent criminal enterprise were successfully apprehended, Ryan Wedding is still at large.
U.S. authorities say Wedding goes by aliases including El Jefe, or the boss. Already a convicted drug trafficker, he's considered armed and dangerous. This veteran Ontario detective says he's never seen a case like this.
It's the largest I've ever even had a small piece of.
The FBI is offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to Wedding's arrest. He has ties to Coquitlam, BC, and is now suspected of hiding out in Mexico. Thomas Daigle, CBC News, Toronto.
Police in Montreal are investigating after a car was deliberately set on fire at the home of a well-known landlord. Emile Benamour's properties have been tied to multiple criminal incidents, including 2 fatal fires, one of them at a hostel earlier this month. His office was also struck by gunfire last week. Officers say no one was injured in the car fire. The suspect got away on foot. Well, residents of two Edmonton neighborhoods are on edge tonight after two separate fires were set and threatening notes left behind. And as Julia Wong explains, those notes are demanding payment or else.
A frightening scene as a family of four fled for their lives after police say their house was intentionally set on fire. But what followed that Sunday morning incident is also alarming. Notes found in nearby mailboxes and at doorsteps, suggesting neighbors could see the same fate unless they pay $1,000 to a Bitcoin address. CBC News has seen the notes, handwritten on index cards, mostly in block letters. We spoke to people at two different homes who received the notes. Neither wanted to speak on camera. They say they're worried for their family's safety. Others in the neighborhood say they're also afraid, scared to sleep, worried whoever did this will come back. It's not the only incident causing concern. Police say in late September, a vehicle in a different neighborhood was deliberately torched, and a note with similar handwriting was left, also demanding Bitcoin. Police say they do not know if the two incidents are directly related.
It's almost identical.
We showed the notes to this former police officer.
These are just folks that are now being extorted at a neighborhood level, which is not just brazen, that's just not really, that's unheard of actually.
And he highlights that Bitcoin is untraceable.
Well, the person's smart because $1,000 is doable. People might pay $1,000 and not call the police and just to make sure they're safe.
But police say that is a problem.
Your silence or paying off these folks is only going to empower and embolden them and cause more victims. Make sure you call the police.
Police say they're pouring resources into the investigations, but nerves likely to be unsettled until those responsible are found. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
Another Liberal cabinet shuffle may soon be necessary, with four more ministers now saying they won't run for re-election. All four were first elected as MPs in 2015 when Justin Trudeau won his first and only majority. The last shuffle was barely a month ago after two other prominent ministers left cabinet. And the fallout is mounting tonight from Trudeau's bombshell testimony about parliamentarians and candidates being compromised by foreign actors. Ashley Burke now with the new calls to the Prime Minister to make those names public and why it's unlikely they'll be answered.
For months, the opposition on Parliament Hill has been demanding answers about foreign meddling in Canadian democracy. But now it's the Conservatives under pressure.
The Prime Minister is just playing partisan games here.
The Conservative foreign affairs critic fighting back after Justin Trudeau blasted his leader.
The Prime Minister used the public inquiry as an opportunity for a partisan attack job to smear the Conservative Party and the Conservative Party leader.
Trudeau testified that members of his own party, but also current and former Conservative parliamentarians and candidates, have been engaged in or at high risk of foreign interference. But Trudeau says that information isn't getting to Pierre Poilievre because he refuses to get a security clearance.
Nobody in his party, not him, nobody in a position of power knows the names of these individuals and can take appropriate action.
I am not aware of any of my colleagues or any candidates in the party that are involved with foreign interference threat activities. And if there are, the Prime Minister should tell us who they are.
Poilievre insists if he gets a security clearance, he'll be muzzled by secrecy requirements. But the NDP leader called it a bogus excuse.
It is ludicrous to me that someone who claims to want to be the Prime Minister of this country doesn't want to know of ongoing and serious threats that impact Canadians, that impact us.
The Conservatives say it's the Prime Minister who should stand up in the House of Commons and name names.
But to do so, it's a bit like accusing a bunch of people of a crime without them having any opportunity to defend themselves. It's frankly irresponsible.
Singh is also calling on Trudeau to name those compromised. We asked the Prime Minister's office if Trudeau would do that. It responded and said that if Poilievre wants that information, he'll have to get a security clearance. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
India's government is doubling down, denying claims it worked with mobsters to target Sikh separatists in Canada. Salima Shivji with the growing divide between the two nations and why many in India blame Justin Trudeau.
We will naturally reject.
More denials from India's Foreign Affairs Ministry.
Investigations have revealed
mere days after another round of severe allegations from Canada that Indian agents were engaged in criminal activity against Canadians.
The current crisis in the relationship has been precipitated by Trudeau government's baseless allegations.
This is all Justin Trudeau's fault, India maintains, arguing Canada's Prime Minister is targeting India's diplomats without evidence.
There's a clear pattern to smear India.
Square that with this testimony under oath.
The Indian government made a horrific mistake in thinking that they could interfere.
Two different versions in a very bitter public dispute. As diplomats in both countries pack up, forced to leave their posts, after both India and Canada kicked out the other country's top-level diplomats.
Who's the real terrorist?
At the heart of India's argument that Canada doesn't stop this. Rallies and violent threats, they say, from pro-Khalistan activists in Canada. Indian officials convinced the diplomatic fight is all because Trudeau wants votes from the Sikh community. That view has widespread support in India.
The minor political gains should not dictate your foreign policy with an important partner.
At this market in Delhi, there's pride.
I'm very happy that India's got a spine now.
And a lot of disdain for Trudeau.
So he is doing this to give a macho look so that he can win the election.
If Trudeau goes away, then I think it will be solved very easily.
But that hope on the streets that this tension will fade soon is completely absent from the statements we're hearing from Indian officials. The gulf between Canada and India is now wider than ever. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Delhi.
In less than 15 minutes, Rosie and the At Issue crew will join us with more on Canada's escalating tensions with India and how that is playing out here at home. Well, tonight, the Assembly of First Nations has voted to reject the $47.8 billion child welfare deal reached with the federal government to reform the system. The decision was met with cheers at the gathering in Calgary after a long and emotional debate. The deal was reached in July after a nearly two-decade legal battle over the federal government's underfunding of on-reserve child welfare services. But opponents argued it wasn't good enough. More details are emerging about what was happening with Liam Payne just before he died.
You know I've been taking some time and I've been keeping to myself.
The 911 call for help and the moments before his death.
This was a tragic end for someone so young.
CBC Marketplace investigates misleading claims from some fast food restaurants.
Is the restaurant certified halal? Yeah. The whole restaurant is?
And one man's solution to a bear that kept bursting through the fence.
So I thought I'll put a bear door on here.
We're back in 2. Tonight, fans of old-style musicals are remembering Mitzi Gaynor, a song and dance sensation from the 1950s. Trained as a ballerina, she signed with the Hollywood studio at just 17 years old.
I'm as carny as Kansas in August, high as a flag on the 4th of July.
She's best known for that performance in South Pacific, one of only 2 actors who did their own singing. Her popular TV specials won 6 Emmy Awards, and in this century, at the age of 77, she launched a nightclub act in New York. Mitzi Gaynor was 93 years old. Her manager says she died of natural causes. Well, a 911 call has now been released describing a chaotic scene ahead of the death of Liam Payne in Argentina, where the One Direction star fell from a 3rd-floor balcony. Back to Gabra Salasa on the new developments and the tributes pouring in.
Shedding tears and seeking comfort, Liam Payne's fans stand vigil outside the hotel in Argentina, where the former One Direction singer died Wednesday after falling from a balcony.
A shock. I'm in shock still.
That feeling reverberating around the world. Payne's family told the Associated Press they're heartbroken. His former One Direction bandmates say they're completely devastated, writing, "For now, we will take some time to grieve and process the loss of our brother, who we loved dearly. The memories we shared with him will be treasured forever." During a concert, Payne's friend, singer Rita Ora, paid tribute, as did the UK's Parliament.
Can I also send condolences to the friends and family of Liam Payne? One Direction was loved by millions across the world.
Forensic teams are combing through the site of the tragedy as new details like this 911 call are released. A staff member says a guest overwhelmed by drugs and alcohol was breaking things in their room, highlighting there is a balcony. This picture, released by local police, shows a broken TV in Payne's hotel room. And autopsy results confirm he died from the fall. Payne, who was only 31, spent half his life in the spotlight. As a member of One Direction, he was a global star.
I sort of view them as the internet's first boy band. Pop stars never felt more accessible because of the ways in which they could communicate.
All my life.
But after the band broke up, Payne had some tumultuous times. He spoke about his mental health and addiction struggles. Looking back, this culture critic thinks there's a conversation that needs to be had about
the pressures of fame, what it means to become famous at a really young age, how that might impact people.
Something that you won't forget.
As the investigation into what led up to Payne's death continues, what is clear is the lasting impression he made on his fans. Magda Gebre-Selassie, CBC News, Toronto.
Advocates are speaking out against the halal claims made by some fast food restaurants.
So when an establishment is not well informed, they can lose a customer that day.
Why some question the certificates on the wall. CBC Marketplace investigates. And Rosie's here with that issue. Hi, my friend.
Hi, Adrian. Tonight we are going to talk about Canada's very tense relationship with India.
It seems like folks within the Indian government have decided to create violence and unlawfulness in Canada.
And, of course, the Prime Minister taking aim at Pierre Poilievre over foreign interference. Chantal, Althea, and Andrew join me to talk about that and more.
A Marketplace investigation has found many popular restaurant chains that serve halal food have staff members who can't answer basic questions about halal food. And as Chelsea Agro shows us, some say the system that set out to protect people is often failing.
You can see the meat glisten.
Before food bloggers Mohammed and Sarah Arfan eat at a restaurant, they need to get a few questions answered about the halal food they're being served.
So what we're looking for is the meat halal? Can we see the certificate?
So when an establishment is not well informed, they can lose a customer that day.
For meat like chicken, beef, or lamb to be considered halal, the animal must first be in good health and treated humanely. Then a prayer is recited before the animal is slaughtered by a Muslim, with a swift, deep cut across the throat. To see how well informed some of Canada's top fast food chains are about the halal they're selling, and whether we can trust the certificates they show us, Marketplace went undercover, visiting 2 KFC, Boston Pizza, Popeyes, Osmow's, and Mary Brown's locations across the Toronto area.
Is the restaurant certified halal? Yeah. The whole restaurant is? Yeah. Certified halal? Okay.
6 of the 10 locations said their entire restaurant is certified halal, when in fact, none of them are.
I would be very disappointed if I was the customer of that restaurant and having to find out that I am being misled.
Subadar says the certification system is often misused, and a restaurant should not claim to be certified unless each ingredient and meat source has been verified halal. While the Canadian Food Inspection Agency requires halal products be certified, the certifying bodies, and there are more than a dozen in Canada, are not regulated. Subadar is calling on the government to change that.
First and foremost, we need to decide what the standard is going to be. Everyone needs to be aligned with those standards. And then there should be periodic audits, just like there's audits for everything else, right?
The CFIA declined to talk to us, but says it's up to the certification bodies to ensure religious requirements are adhered to. As for the restaurants, Osmos tells us that it will reach out to its certifiers to learn more about the certification process. Mary Browns tells us that they are committed to transparency. And Boston Pizza told us that its locations which offer halal menu items, well, they are required to complete online training. KFC and Popeyes did not respond to our requests for comment. Charles Agro, CBC News, Toronto.
You can catch Charles C's full investigation tomorrow on Marketplace. That's on CBC Television and CBC Gem. Now let's break down the week in politics. Rosie's here with that issue.
At issue tonight, foreign interference with a partisan punch. The Prime Minister uses his appearance at the public inquiry to go after Pierre Poilievre.
The leader of the official opposition, who is certainly trying very hard to become Prime Minister, is choosing to play partisan games with foreign interference.
This comes after the RCMP say Indian officials were behind crimes against Canadians, leading to the expulsion of 6 diplomats.
It seems like folks within the Indian government have decided to create violence and unlawfulness in Canada.
So what's to be made of how Canada is handling these issues with India, and are our political leaders responding as they should to foreign interference? I'm Rosemary Barton here to break it down tonight. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj. Good to see you all. I must say I was, starting Monday, was desperate to hear from all of you about how things have unfolded, and especially after yesterday and the Prime Minister's testimony and his sharp criticisms and sharp words for Pierre Poilievre, and then the Conservative response. So maybe let's start there, Chantal, in terms of what you made of what the Prime Minister did yesterday.
I thought it was interesting and totally, I guess, unexpected. Not that the notion that there are parliamentarians associated with the Conservative Party, past or present, and parliamentarians, the term is important because it could be senators or MPs or candidates that have had or have brushes with foreign interference. We knew that from the parliamentary committee report that came out last spring. And by the way, if seriously we believe that there are attempts at foreign interference in this country, and there certainly are, obviously, the Conservatives would be a target, not just to keep them down, as China might have wanted in previous elections, but also to have people on the inside of public policy going forward. The polls would suggest to anyone who's looking to have some influence from inside that you should target the Conservative Party. So the Prime Minister saying that was no surprise, but it did put the finger, and he touched a nerve. And obviously he touched a nerve because he is read and has had intelligence that Pierre Poilievre is not wanted to have. And what I found interesting is the initial reaction of the Conservatives saying the Prime Minister is lying. One, he's under oath, but even if you don't believe that, Justice Ugg, who presides over this commission, has had access to almost as many unredacted documents as the Prime Minister. So she, in the end, will be the person deciding whether there is a serious mistake on the part of a party leader that doesn't want to know the lay of the land within his own party, not Justin Trudeau. But if she thought that the Prime Minister was using her commission to lie and smear a political party, I think we would have had some hints of that in her questioning of the Prime Minister.
So where does that leave Pierre Poilievre then, Andrew, in terms of his position about not getting these security briefings, given what the Prime Minister said yesterday and what happens next?
Well, he certainly left the Prime Minister an opening. Chantal is right. There are intelligence reports about members of all parties. And I think the first responsibility of any party leader is to clean house in their own party, whatever they want to say about other parties. Now, that being said, I didn't think it looked particularly prime ministerial for the Prime Minister on the witness stand with such grave issues at stake to take such a nakedly partisan shot. And let's not kid ourselves, politicians are never more partisan than when they're accusing somebody else of playing partisan games. This is, we are under attack here from several fronts. We've got great powers, hostile foreign powers, murdering our citizens on Canadian soil, infiltrating our parliament, corrupting our politicians, possibly having a hand in deciding who wins our leadership races. The stuff that is coming out is just absolutely scalding. And it's really time for all of the party leaders, the Prime Minister and Mr. Poilievre, to be sobering up and getting serious about this. And they show no signs of that. But, you know, it's remarkable. You know, the Prime Minister, when it comes to the events within his own party, he and his officials were remarkably able to avoid briefings, to not read memos, to not get memos, to be kept in the dark conveniently. But when it comes up to you know, misdeeds within the Conservative Party, he's remarkably well briefed. So I thought his sudden interest in knowing the granular details of every other party, I think, was interesting. And secondly, he admitted afterwards, when he was under questioning, that, yeah, he knew the names of some other MPs in his own party and other parties as well, which he hadn't mentioned in that first kind of headline-grabbing outburst. And what has he done about that? He's very concerned, and rightly so, that Mr. Poilievre should take hold of events within the Conservative Party. What has he done? What consequences will anybody within any of these parties face if it is found that they were in fact doing what the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians accuses them of having done?
Althea.
I'm not sure that we will even know the answer to that question, to Andrew's question. A few things. One, it's interesting that so much has been made about the Prime Minister's words, because I'm not sure that he actually told us anything we didn't already know. If you parse the words, he says, I have the names of a number of parliamentarians, comma, former parliamentarians, comma, and or candidates in the Conservative Party of Canada who are engaged, comma, or at high risk of, comma, or for whom there's clear intelligence around foreign interference. I read that because it could be candidates, it could be former parliamentarians, like a former senator in the Conservative caucus that everyone had suspicions was possibly a compromised individual. It could just mean that one person. Like, his statement was so vague that it could mean anything. It was clearly a partisan move, drafted for political reasons. No doubt the Prime Minister, I think we have noticed a tone change starting on Monday with, I am in charge, I am the leader, I am taking, you know, I'm acting the Prime Minister, I'm taking these decisions, for obvious reasons because of the tumultuousness of caucus. So I think that there were partisan reasons why he did that, but also when you parse his words, it's not clear what he's actually saying. I do think that he has hit a nerve because it is a vulnerability for Mr. Pierre Poilievre's position that, frankly, he should not have staked a year ago, which suggests that he doesn't have the maturity to want to have the responsibilities of becoming Prime Minister. Why would you willfully choose ignorance? And his excuse that while he doesn't want to have his hands tied and his lips sealed so that he can't levy all types of accusations in the House, frankly, just doesn't hold water. If you're the Prime Minister, you should be able to parse information that you have in the back of your head that colors information that you can use to make decisions, right? Like, you should be able to communicate that. And I do wonder if we're going to see a reversal in the Conservative leader's stance on that.
Chantal, I'm running out of time, but Chantal.
Okay, two things. The Commission does interviews with the people who go on the witness stand before they go on the witness stand, and some of that transcript is shared. And I found it really curious that in that pre-interview, not on the stand, the Prime Minister told the Commission that this National Security Advisor had told him something, facts that were explosive, quote unquote, through those words, about another federal party. Now, explosive is a pretty big word, and it doesn't seem to refer to just the parliamentary report. First question. Second, this will not be the last time that Pierre Poilievre hears about this, because Justice Ogg's mandate is to look forward to the next election. And I suspect that based on what happened yesterday, she will be recommending that parties and party leaders clean up their own shops by getting the proper security clearance to know the lay of the land within their caucuses. So this won't go away. No matter how much the Conservatives say this wasn't fair and the Prime Minister was playing games.
Unless, of course, he does get the security briefing. Just Althea's point quickly, Andrew.
It's one thing to talk about existing parliamentarians or whatever, but we still have this large issue of nomination and leadership races, which again, there is an all-party consensus to do nothing about.
Okay, got to leave it there. We're going to talk about the other part of this, which Althea hinted at, all of this dissent, this brewing dissent within the Liberal caucus.
The message that I've been getting loud and clear and more strongly as time goes by is that it's time for him to go, and I agree.
How is the Prime Minister dealing with this unrest? Will they respond to calls to oust the Prime Minister? That's next. At issue, a push for change at the top. Some Liberal MPs are trying to oust the Prime Minister and planning to raise it at caucus next week. At least one MP is speaking publicly.
The message that I've been getting loud and clear and more strongly as time goes by is that it's time for him to go, and I agree.
Today we also heard 4 cabinet ministers have said they will not run again. How is the Prime Minister responding to all of this? How real is the threat? Let's bring everybody back. Chantal, Andrew, and Althea. I'll start with Althea because she broke the story just as this bureau was typing out the words. Althea's story went up before ours. It's a race to the finish line. We didn't curse you though, Althea. How dire is this situation for the Prime Minister right now?
I don't know. There are several groups of MPs in caucus, and the numbers have grown. And what has changed is that they're talking to each other in a way that they haven't before, and they're obviously organizing in a way that they haven't actively before. Whether it amounts to anything, it's really too early to tell. One, because we've reported on this at the very early infancy and to the chagrin of many of the instigators who wanted to see this happen only after the fact. And two, the Prime Minister doesn't want to go, wants to fight, and is refusing to leave. So it will take a substantial number of caucus members to pressure him to resign. There is no heir apparent waiting in the wings, which complicates things slightly because the question of, well, what next isn't really answered. There are several mechanisms that MPs are discussing, and they are signing a letter encouraging him, or with the purpose of encouraging him to step down. Some people want to storm the mic at caucus. There are calls for a secret ballot vote at the next caucus meeting. Some people have suggested a press conference. But what they really want is for the Prime Minister to realize, in their view, that he cannot win and that he should just step aside so that another leader has possibly a better chance of winning.
Right.
I don't know.
I mean, that seems like a gamble, Andrew, to me, to say this guy's of no use to us, so we'll dump him, and we'll figure out who's next, and we'll hope the path is easier.
Yeah, the difficulty they have, I think, the Rebels, is the hopelessness of the situation. It'd be one thing if you thought we can make this change and at least have a fighting chance, or there's such necessity. I mean, you look at what happened with the Democrats, where Joe Biden said, "I'm not going, no way, no how." And people waited him out and forced him out because why? Well, because there was still a chance to win, and they absolutely had to win for the good of the Republic. I don't think you can make, frankly, either argument here. The situation isn't nearly as dire for the country, and certainly not enough, I think, for the party to make those kinds of decisions. So it's mostly just, can we make anything better by doing this? We don't have an heir apparent. You know, I just think that's the situation they're facing. It was interesting. There was some rumors that they might get the odd cabinet minister to sign on to this, and instead what you see are these cabinet ministers saying we're not going to run again, which is
no, but it's not the same group, Andrew.
I know,
you might still get some cabinet ministers.
I'm just saying it's not necessarily, you know, that if you could get cabinet ministers on side, that's one thing, but just saying you're going to leave, that's just
the optics aren't great, but yeah,
but they will
for
only join
reasons.
when it's a sure thing, right? Because they would be resigning their position.
Yeah, for sure. Chantal, you've seen this play before, so how is this different, or how might it play out?
Actually, there's a lot of it that looks like what I saw before, and I'm going back to when the last time Liberals signed a letter to tell a leader to leave. The leader was John Turner. I can't name you the people who signed that letter, or I couldn't have that week, because lo and behold, none of them in broad daylight wanted to confess to his or her signature.
Yes.
And John Turner remained this leader. You do not get rid of a leader by signing a letter, for the record. People who have succeeded, but it requires a bit of a spine, the capacity to walk, were the people in the Canadian Alliance caucus who decided Stockwell they had to go. What did they do? They went and they sat They left caucus, they left the party. Now, if those people who are signing letters, those MPs, really, really want to get rid of Justin Trudeau, then they can say they're all going to sit as independent, and he's going to be gone tomorrow because he will not have a government that he can sustain. But short of that, it's becoming a bit of a farce to watch. We're going to give him a letter, then we're going to storm the mics, and then what?
It's very difficult to take down any political party leader in the Canadian system because the leader has all the cards, particularly over your nomination, for example. It's even rarer to see it happen to a sitting prime minister. If I'm right, I think it's only happened to 2 in our history. One was Jean Chrétien, the other was Mackenzie Bowell. So it's a really difficult job that they've assigned themselves.
I don't see any evidence that anyone is willing to go in front of a camera and say these things, or do what Chantal is saying, suddenly form an independent caucus. Maybe they'll get there, but at this stage, they don't seem to be there.
No, I can't see anybody walking out and doing what the group, like the Chuck Strahl group did under Stockwell Day. I don't see that happening. There are more and more people, though, who are being vocal. Like Sean Casey has come out and his message changed. You know, we heard from Alexandra Mendez, the Montreal area MP in September, who said, well, all my constituents want him to go. But she said she didn't go as far as Mr. Casey in saying, and I also think he should go. So the thing that has happened, and why I think that there wasn't that mobilizing factor after the Toronto-St. Paul by-election, was because it was the summer and the MPs weren't together. Now the MPs are together. So they're all talking to each other and they're realizing that they all feel the same way. I shouldn't say all.
A lot.
A lot of them feel the same way. I don't know if I could say most, but about them, at least half, I would say, feel the same way.
Not a majority yet, though.
I think once there is a shuffle, you'll have angry people, because you have people that are sitting on the fence at the moment who do not want to knife the lady because they actually want to have a cabinet position for how many months, I don't know. And so there will be even more angry people, and then maybe they will have the numbers. But
quickly, Chantal.
But at some point, these people are on a clock with no one to lead them to the promised land that they all seem to be dreaming of. At this point, the most realistic scenario, and it's a stretch, would be under a new leader or Justin Trudeau to hold the Conservatives down to a minority. And we're not even there. So if they're going to spend the next 4 or 5 months that they may have doing this squabbling, let's see if we can kill the leader, not knowing who we want next, they have to be assuming that there are strong candidates who want to take the hit in the next election rather than wait out the election to become the leader of the party and try to pick up the pieces.
Well, we know that there are.
You can see what important questions of principle are involved, though.
Okay, I
who
gotta
will
go.
give me a job?
I
Who
gotta
will
go.
save my seat?
I suspect we'll talk about this next week after the caucus meeting Wednesday. Thank you all very much. Now I'll send things back to Adrian in Toronto.
Thanks, Rosie. Next, a homeowner's creative solution to a bit of a big problem.
My wife and I are watching Netflix, and all of a sudden the panels just start disappearing.
The doggy door made for a bear in our moment. That is BC's Kurt Shiwi there, showing off his new dog door, but made supersized for a black bear that has repeatedly smashed through his fence to get to his backyard. So rather than get angry, he decided to make both of their lives easier, doing something different from just repairing the fence over and over again. And tonight, his swinging solution makes our moment.
So we moved here into North Van from Edmonton about 10 years ago. We were kind of on a route where the bears go from the street to the river. About 5 weeks ago, we had a new fence put in. My wife and I are watching Netflix, and all of a sudden the panels just start disappearing. It's about 9 at night, and the bear's there just swatting the panels out. So I thought, oh, I'll put a bear door on here. And we were just kind of goofing around, me and my kids, and we didn't think it would work. Then I took one of my Arlo cameras, put it above the door, and we just kind of waited to see what would happen. There was the footage, and the bear just came down the driveway, walked right through like he'd done it a million times, and we were floored. And that it actually worked, and it worked so easy. We really like the bear, but we're trying to be responsible about it. We love having them around. Be safe, be responsible, and we're pretty happy that he cuts through our yard. And now with this bear door, it's very convenient for him, and we get to watch him all the time.
And a lot cheaper, too, because he doesn't have to keep repairing this fence. In fact, it was easy for him, he said, to know where to put the bear door because he just had to look for where all of the claw prints were always going. From all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to The National's YouTube channel. I'm Adrienne Arsenault.